Hi, today we're going to talk about how we manage the international risk within doing import-export business. And what I'm going to use for today, just go to the next slide, is using a PESTEL analysis. PESTEL analysis, we usually use it for strategic planning and to do with international companies. Most of what elements or factors which affects that kind of analysis would be suitable for international trade as well. As you can see in PESTEL analysis, PESTEL stands for political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal analysis. So you look at the market and you consider all these elements. Some are more important than the others, depends to the country, the business, and so on, so which you are going to go into. Some is less important. Now, if you just change the graph now again for you, now what you're going to see is a simple PESTEL analysis diagram there. You can see political. We're going to talk about political in a minute, a lot more detail. Economics, we have looked at economics before. I mean, obviously you're taking a business from one country to another country. Obviously you're looking at having identify some advantages in that business from country X to move products to country B. So that we have already seen those things. The social elements, we have seen it. The product has to obviously be suitable for the country you're taking to. The name of it, the packaging of it, the wording of it, suitability of it, of the product in the country you're taking to. Technological usually takes a longer sort of effect. It's not something like tomorrow something gonna happen. So in an import-export business, which you are moving goods pretty fast and turning it around, we're not going to look at that in that much detail. Environmental is important. Definitely have to follow the regulations of the country you are taking your goods to and making sure that it's satisfying all the environmental requirements. And the legal is much more important for you to making sure that you are within the right legal framework. We're going to see that one in more detail as well. So that's a PESTEL analysis, which we do it of defining the macro environment and the factors affecting it, which we use it, as I say, in the strategic planning. But here we will just using some of the items with regard to international trade. Let me just change the graph now. Okay, let's look at the political risk. It is important to understand that if you are involved much more than just sending goods to another country or supplying the buyers, you need to understand the political environment of the country you are sending your goods to. Things like embargo can happen, so you have to understand what's the international affairs of the country. Are they subject to possible embargoes and sanctions in the coming months and whatever? So it can, so the embargo can happen, a sanction can happen, and your goods would be left in the middle of nowhere. No way for it to come back or go forward. Civil disorder, you have, I think Egypt last year, out of the blue, suddenly the country went in revolutionary mode. So goods who were in transit, the buyers, everything goes into a disorder. So a lot of people, I'm sure, they lost their money. Political upheavals, again, look at Egypt, everything settled down, they have a president, then another whatever coup or whatever we get happen. So the whole thing went again back into unrest. A natural disaster, it just was a few weeks ago, you had a hurricane hitting Philippines, destroying a lot of urban and rural areas, the big losses. Obviously civil disorder can happen, natural disasters as well. So you cannot foresee these natural disasters coming, but usually certain countries are more susceptible to hurricanes or storms or earthquakes, so you can take into consideration, probably get extra insurance for that. Also, there are human rights requirements, beside the trade sanctions, and your goods can have a duality of use. It can be used for defensive or offensive weapon, as an offensive or defensive weapon. I was saying a knife, it can be used in the kitchen as a kitchen knife, but it can be used as a defensive weapon for somebody defending themselves against an intruder coming to their house, or it can be an offensive. Somebody come in the street and rob somebody and use a knife. So you can look at your product and see does it comply with international laws and so on. You also have to make sure that your product going to a certain country, it's complying with all their rules and regulations with regard, there might be a country has got a sanction against another country, although you are not shipping the products from the embargoed country, but if they identify that is parts of it coming from an embargo country or sanctioned country, it may the whole thing be to be arrested and put it aside and goes into a sort of a legal procedure. So you have to make sure those issues not going to rise for your product. Now, we're going to look at legal risks as well. Now, first of all, the most important thing you have to consider is the difference between legal systems. The two countries, which are two different sovereign countries, do not have necessarily the same legal systems. Even if we have got a very similar legal system, it is different. The jurisdiction is different. Even the law is the same. There's different jurisdiction. That means it's not your country, it's another country. Now you have to see, you can obviously sign a contract and say this contract is subject to, let's say, UK law, where we are residing. Fine is good, but if you cannot get the guilty party to UK, that's no good. If you cannot influence anything, you cannot arrest their assets. There is, you can go to court, spend a lot of money, win the court, but where is the guy to get? Where is, the company is not represented in UK. So the jurisdiction is important. Can you also influence, or can you, even if you get a court, you're successful day in a court, we may not be able to implement the court findings. Remember the differences in the contract law, so make sure you have got lawyers who can understand the law of the land of the country which the contract is drawn up. Also the question of which laws apply, as we discussed it. We're going to go down intellectual property and patent registration rights. Now that's another difficult area. You have to make sure that in the country you are sending your goods, if it happens to be software, or for example, it cannot be copied, or if it's copied, you can defend it. There is also product liability laws and the implied warranties, the consumer rights. If your product, let's say, cause a damage, or it cause a injury to somebody, you might be obviously responsible for it, for faulty electrics or so on. So you have to know what are the liability laws in the country you're sending your goods to. Health and safety laws, make sure your product is complying with that. It's not necessarily always that I got that license and approval. That does not necessarily protect you. You have to make sure your product is complying properly with the health and safety regulation of the country. Also, if you're exporting, let's say, expertise, and you are sending with your product some engineers or trainers to work in the country of the client, now you are responsible for these people you're sending to this country. So if something happened to them, let's say you are installing some machinery in Baghdad, in Iraq, and you're sending a team down there, now you have to look at who is responsible for the safety of these people. Most likely you would be, if they are employed by you. And if something happened to them in the third country, you would be responsible in your own country. So you need to get the proper insurance and coverage for that. There are, you may, if you usually, if you have got a problem, send the goods to another country and you get into a litigation and you have got a disagreement there. Not necessarily you would be allowed to take your case to the court down there, because they would work on a different regulation. So if there is a chance of that happening, you take a legal advice beforehand. Taxation and revenue laws. You have to make sure that if you are involved in the goods movement after the border into the country, what are your taxations obligations there. Negligence and misrepresentation laws also apply. So your products packaging and writings on it, or whatever you in your advertising you are saying, you have to make sure it's following the local rules and regulations. Now, these are main areas which you have to pay attention to. Other risks, let's look at that, like obviously bribery and giving gifts. Bribery is illegal, as the word suggests, but you may just give a client a gift, or somebody who works in a client's office a gift. That can be seen as bribery and can be illegal. So be careful. Don't just say, oh, I took this rug and it's quite nice, I bought it for you, thank you for a business you sent to me. But it can be illegal and you can be arrested and put in jail. So very careful about, even if you're giving gifts. So obviously you should not get engaged in anything illegal, but something you may think is not illegal, it can be illegal. So just don't give people gifts. I think that's the best. Just a smile and say thank you. Your products can be, if it's agricultural product or food stuff, it can go into quarantine, and so it can be kept for checking is safe for consumption or release in the general market. So check these things beforehand. Exchange rate risks, we talked about it before. Obviously, if you are not trading with in your own currency, there is always a risk with the exchange rate. We talked about it before. You can get hedged against your own currency, or you can work it out. You go back to previous lecture, you will see how to deal with the exchange rate risk. And a non-payment risk also, we looked at it when we were looking at our payment system, which we suggested best one is to get a letter of credit always. It protects both parties. Those two risks, we have seen it before. If you go to previous lectures, you will find out. Just finishing here now, the main area to be considered about is the political risks and legal risk. So the legal risks, just get the legal advice to make sure your contracts are drawn properly. It works in both jurisdictions. Don't rely, just say it is in our jurisdiction, because you may not have, there is no point to fighting somebody which is not present in your own country. With political risk, you want to make sure that the country is not going to go haywire and change of government and revolutions. And if it's going to happen, or there is a chance of that, you take a proper precaution for that and get you covered. Thank you very much. See you later.